Thanks for the year of free rent in Brooklyn. So a friend and I move into this newly renovated apartment in Brooklyn. It's nice enough, but just about every one of the 14 units has some sort of weird problem. One unit had the hot and cold water mixed up flush a few times and get a heated toilet. One unit none of the outlets are grounded. One unit there are gaps around the windows. The problem in our unit was a leak in the air conditioner lines. The leak was probably at the roof, but we ended up with no AC. We called them and it takes a month to get someone. He refills the lines and a week later the problem comes back. We spend the summer getting the system topped up every week. At the end of the summer they decided that our repairs and all of the neighbors were getting too expensive. So they send us bills. Our bill was in the tens of thousands of dollars. Recharging that system weekly must have been expensive. They also start trying to charge every unit for any infraction, like $100 for every unit for a single scrap of paper found in a hall. The tenants all get together to have a little meeting. It turns out that they never got a certificate of occupancy for the building. The city had it on the books as a furniture warehouse. So collectively we all just stopped paying them. Rent, fines, fees, nothing. We retain a lawyer and just live there. The company tried to get us out by cutting lighting and other services. We contacted the lawyer, the company would get fined, and we'd get our lights back. They tried to change the main lock once but we let the locksmith know what was going on so he stopped. They didn't try it a second time. The first floor of the building was an off-track betting parlor. They were particularly noisy and obnoxious, so one resident called the health department over a moldy loaf of bread we found in the basement. One of my best memories was watching a bunch of guys in hazmat suits clear out the betting parlor so they could run tests. Eventually they try to get the certs, but to do that they need to do inspections with the drywall removed. They tried to do it while we lived there and the lawyer fought it for not being in a livable state. Finally they realized they needed us out if they got the C of O while we were still there. We'd owe back rent. They take us to court to get evictions. Lawyer gets everything pushed back as far as he can, but finally we go to city court. Lawyer points out that they're trying to evict 14 units, but you can't evict more than 10 at a time. Court ejects the case. I don't think their lawyer gets a single word in. So now we get a county court date for an ejection instead of an eviction. Again, lawyer pushes it out as much as he can, but eventually we go. Court agrees to eject us all, but sees the evidence of lighting and lock tampering. Asks our lawyer what would be a reasonable time frame. Lawyer asks for 4 months. Judge gives us 6. Everyone stays until the last month. At the end of it all, we got to live in a newly renovated apartment in a trendy area of Brooklyn for free for a little over a year. When enough is enough, people lose jobs and go to prison. This is my story. I finally feel like I can talk about this particular time in my life and appreciate what it took. I'm not on mobile, so feel free to criticize my grammar. Although English is not my first language, so temper the criticism. Warning. This is a very long post. TLDR. Abuses made my first year of high school a waking nightmare. Asshole vice principal was the final straw. I decided to face my fears and took them all down. Vice principal gets fired. Most of my abusers get a decade in prison. Background. This ProRevenge took place when I was in high school in the mid-2000s, a time in my country when there was much public outcry over bullying and hazing in boarding schools. A couple of students in different schools had died from injuries resulting from bullying. Other schools were rioting and burning shit. They were under increased scrutiny. It was a whole thing. Personally, my life in high school was not fun. I was a fat boy with very low self-esteem going into my first year. The bullying I experienced quickly led to a depression. I was prone to self-harm and recklessness and a bit of suicidal ideation. The thing that made high school particularly nightmarish though was the sexual abuse. Low-key comments about my sexuality from this group of about 5 boys in 4th form. They called me and my best friends gay. The social stigma associated with homosexuality here is really extreme. These boys would stalk and terrorize me. They left threatening notes under my sheets. "We're going to fuck you up for being a fucking gay. We're going to fucking rape you," etc. So I had only one close friend who knew what was going on. Ironically, after an entire term of convincing everyone that I was gay, this same group began sexually abusing me. I'll spare you the details, but my first year in high school was the worst time of my life. But you're not here for my sad story, so moving on. Sometime in the middle of the term, the vice principal VP of our school was changed due to the aforementioned public backlash from the bullying scandals. The previous VP was a decent man, but the new VP was not. He came with a well-earned reputation of being unnecessarily harsh, dishing out suspensions and expulsions like candy on Halloween. The last straw. A few weeks after the new VP came in, and I'm having an incredibly shitty week that is really battering my mind. Yes, the bullying and sexual abuse was still going on. Now, every Friday night, a group of kids used to climb through a window into the computer lab and play video games. The windows had bars on them, but a slim person could fit through. I am not slim by any definition, unless the definition is fat. Among this group of kids was this troublemaker dude in my class and my dorm with the same common name. Turns out, the VP had confused the two of us, and I was the one who was in his crosses. That Friday, the kids were caught. Some of them, including my namesake, managed to escape. The VP was called in and the students who were caught snitched. Security was sent to the dorms to bring the other culprits. Cue me being woken up at 300 am in the morning and dragged to the scene of the crime to endure a beating for something I hadn't done. Corporal punishment was tacitly legal then. Now, my explanation that there is clearly no way for me to fit through the window were met with more canings. What really pissed me off was that the VP had us bring our belongings to his office at night for an inspection with the excuse of searching for stolen computer equipment. He came across my very private journal, and like the dick he was, he proceeded to ridicule me for having a diary in front of the teachers, watchmen, and the students I was bundled with. It didn't help matters that I broke down and cried in front of them. I don't think I have ever felt such a humiliation in my life before. The following morning, we were suspended for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, my parents took me back to school. I had only told them of the mistaken identity that I suspected and the wrongful accusation. They already knew about the bullying. I didn't tell them about the VP going through my diary or the sexual stuff. I was still writhing in humiliation. The VP, being the absolute bunghole that he was, had convinced himself that I was the ringleader of this group of boys. Again, mistaken identity. And thus deserved extra punishment. He ordered me to clear out a large patch of weeds and overgrown grass between the rugby pitch and the hockey field, about the size of a football field, using only a slasher. Just as I'm about to head out, it starts raining and it's the middle of July, so much cold. Temperatures regularly dip to below 10 degrees Celsius at night. So instead of going to the field, I head to class to wait out the rain. A few minutes later, the VP barged in furious, interrupting the geography lesson. He proceeded to tear me a new one, even mentioning my private journal, and then he threatened to expel me if I left the field before I finished my punishment. Mind you, this was one of the best schools in our region. It had actually been my first choice. He proceeded to cane me again just to make his point stick. At this point I just broke. All of this punishment was due to something that I had not done. I was completely innocent, but this wipe just couldn't listen. The ridicule, the humiliation, the bullying, and the abuse all just came to a head at that point, and I decided to just fuck it all to hell. So I walked out into the rain, slasher in hand, with not even a sweater. This was about 4 in the afternoon. I never returned. I think the VP never really expected me to complete the punishment. But then, I doubt he had ever met someone who decided they had no more fucks left to give either. My initial plan was to crucify him with his own words. Dusk fell with me cold and drenched, ripping up ferns from the ground. By midnight, I was shivering and crying uncontrollably and it was too dark to see shit. I still persevered and started blindly cutting the grass, driven by this mad desire to just hurt. I really didn't care who I hurt. Sure, a part of my motivation was that if I did get sick out here, the VP would be in a fuckload of trouble, but there was another part of me that was just like, fuck it, life sucks anyways. By midnight, I was too cold to continue. I ran out of energy and just sat down under a tree. Towards dawn I was so cold from the rain and the wind that my shivers began reducing. It was impossible for me to sleep. The teachers finally found me there a couple of hours after dawn. Apparently, the teacher on duty had found my desk empty during morning study time between 4:30 and 6:00 am. When he asked where I was, it came about that I had not been in bed the previous night either. He then called the VP and other teachers who began searching the school and they finally found me in the field. The ProRevenge. Yay. It's finally here. I don't know much about what happened immediately after. I was so out of it. I do remember the teachers rushed me to the school nurse, who immediately recommended I be taken to the hospital. I spent a week there due to complications pneumonia. And a very expensive week it was, all on the school's dime. My parents were pissed as fuck, and I couldn't blame them. The school's board of governors convened after my parents contacted them. The days before my parents and I were called in to speak before the board, I had the idea to just face my fears and put everything out in the open. I was just done with that school and everybody there. So on that day, in front of a group of musty old men in the boardroom, I finally shed my burden. I told them everything, my only motivation being to bury the piece of shit VP and my tormentors. I don't think I've ever done anything that scary before. From the mistaken identity, the suspension, the punishment in the rain, the threat to expel me if decided to seek shelter, and the crown jewel, the bullying and the sexual abuse, I laid it all out. I knew that would definitely get their attention. The board called my best friend, who backed me up. The VP was in no position to win a he said they said contest with us at that moment. The VP was fired that day. A few days later, a zero tolerance policy on bullying was announced. I think the board was acutely afraid of finding themselves in the news for all the wrong reasons. They didn't want their school to be one of those schools, despite the fact that it was one of the worst. Over the holidays my friend told me that things got really serious after that. People didn't know why, but suddenly, any act of bullying was met with immediate and unconditional expulsion. As for the boys who had been terrorizing me, they were arrested. My dad went to the police with the threatening notes I had been receiving all year long. The school board supported us in this, on the condition that we, my parents and I, do not take the story to the media. I was happy with that arrangement. I had no desire to be the face of male rape victims. We had a few meetings with an investigator from the public prosecutor's office. A couple of months later, the office reached out, told us that the boys had pleaded guilty. One of them got off scot-free cause his dad was some senior army guy corruption SMH. 3 of them got 10 years each. The last one got 18. The topping. They were all in their 4th and final year. They got arrested just as they were about to sit for their national exams to go to university. Their lives are ruined and I have absolutely no remorse for them. Edit. Well, this blew up. Thank you guys for the support and the DMs. It's really encouraging to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I will try and reply to all of you and give a few more details. Thanks guys.